My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Hello and welcome to the briefing with me, Gloria De Piero. Parliament might be in recess, but there's still lots coming up today, including fantasy PMQs. And I'll be talking standards with Conservative MP Alberto Costa. But first is the news with Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon, I'm Rosie Wright. This is your news at 12 o'clock. A survivor of child sexual exploitation is calling for the resignations of the Rotherham Council leader and the South Yorkshire Police and Crime Commissioner. It comes after GB News revealed up to 1,600 children may have been at risk of grooming in the borough since 2017. Rotherham Council is meeting this afternoon to discuss child sexual abuse in the town. A survivor who spoke to GB News is demanding action.
It's a despicable behaviour when we're speaking about children being abused. And I think that has come from Councillor Chris Reid and Alan Billings. If they're incapable of protecting the people and the children of this town, they need to do the right thing and walk away.
The South Yorkshire Police and Crime Commissioner, Alan Billings, says he's invited them to meet police teams working on child sexual exploitation to help them better understand grooming. And the leader of Rotherham Council, Chris Reid, says he has the deepest of respect for her and her views. Now, Sir Geoffrey Cox, who's been accused of misusing his office for a second job, says he doesn't believe he's breached parliamentary rules. Labour's called for a standards investigation after an image appeared to show the Tory MP carrying out private work for the British Virgin Islands inquiry in his office. Deputy Labour leader Angela Rayner says the actions seem to be a brazen breach of the rules. From Monday, people in Wales will need to show a COVID pass to go to the cinema, theatre and concert halls. Protesters have been demonstrating against the extended measures. Currently in Wales, you need proof of full vaccination or a negative COVID test result to get into nightclubs and large events.
Come to Cardiff today to make my voices heard, to actually have solidarity with people in Wales, to say it's absolutely unacceptable that there should be any vaccine passports. The last vote at the Senate should not have gone through. It was a draw, 28-28. It went through on a technical hitch. Now we're faced with them being extended to different venues across Wales.
Negotiators from nearly 200 countries are scrutinising a first draft of the COP26 agreement, hoping to strike a deal before the summit ends on Friday. The paper published this morning urges nations to revisit and strengthen their emissions targets for 2030 so that global warming is limited to 1.5 degrees Celsius. The Prime Minister is returning to the conference, which is shifting its focus to transport and low-carbon travel. Poland has sent around 15,000 soldiers to its border with Belarus. The Polish Defence Minister says more migrants attempted to breach the border overnight. Belarus's leader, Alexander Lukashenko, denies claims he's sending people en masse to Europe in revenge for EU sanctions. The bloc says it's close to imposing further sanctions against the country.
You know, we're moving from a situation where we had a sort of hybrid war to a very dangerous situation where, you know, you've got thousands of people potentially moving to the border, and you've got armed border guards on both sides, one trying to push them across and one trying to prevent them from coming over. So it's really a very dangerous situation at the moment on the Polish-Belarusian border. And a spark, a single spark, you know, could really set things off in a very unpleasant way and lead to an even more serious escalation.
The RSPCA has launched an investigation into a video which shows a woman kicking and punching a horse. The charity said it was actively looking into the case, describing the images as upsetting. The primary school teacher, who's reportedly now received death threats since the video was shared online, has been suspended from her job. Medical experts are calling for military-grade first aid kits to be installed in venues like football stadiums and train stations. They're aiming to help save lives in stabbings and terrorist attacks. St John Ambulance, UK Counter-Terrorism Police and a group of doctors say public access trauma kits need to be installed in key locations. Dr Lynn Thomas, the medical director of St John Ambulance, told GB News there currently isn't any type of first aid kit like this in the UK.
There is no consistent way that the public would know what to do or have any access to equipment to look after somebody who'd been involved in trauma. Trauma can be anything. It might be a road traffic accident, it might be, unfortunately, a stabbing or a terrorist attack, but it's just so that the public will know what is available for them to be able to help somebody that's in front of them.
A pair of diamond bracelets that belong to Marie Antoinette have sold at auction for £6.3 million. The sale is several times higher than estimates of between 1 and 3 million. The bracelets bear the former Queen of France's name and they're made up of 112 diamonds, silver and gold. You are up to date here on GB News. I'll be back to keep you up to date in half an hour.
Coming up this hour on The Briefing, Parliament is in recess, but that's not stopping us today. We'll be holding Fantasy Prime Minister's Question Time with Andrew Rosendale, Conservative MP for Romford, and Siobhan McDonagh, Labour MP for Mitcham and Morden. I'll be talking sleaze with Alberto Costa MP, the Conservative MP for South Leicestershire, and a member of the Committee on Standards. Also, we'll be finding out what it's really like in the House of Lords and whether it's time to fundamentally reform it when I chat to Lord John Mann. And give me your political briefing. Send in your views and opinions by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. First, Boris Johnson is travelling by train up to Glasgow to speak again at COP26. Our political correspondent Tom Harwood is there and joins us now. Tom Harwood, we don't have Tom Harwood. So we will come back to Tom Harwood later in the programme. How could we not? Now, MPs are in a short recess, which will surely be a relief, given the events of the last week or so. The sleaze row is rumbling on and MPs' other jobs are coming under scrutiny. Some will be on holiday, and the whereabouts of MP and lawyer Geoffrey Cox is unknown. Other than that, he is abroad, but I'm delighted to have two dedicated MPs with me in the studio today for my Fantasy PMQs panel. Andrew Rosendale, Conservative MP for Romford, and Siobhan McDonagh, Labour MP for Mitcham and Morden. Welcome to you both, and thank you for joining me. It's very good of you to do so in recess. Andrew, if Prime Minister's Question Time was happening today, and you had a question, because this is a Fantasy PMQs, what would your question be?
Why have we got a recess?
It's actually only 2 days. It's just 2 days. It's a silly recess, actually. It's just 2 days. I actually think there's so many things I'd like to ask Boris, but I think probably the one thing that my constituents keep on asking me is why, after all this time, have we not sorted out the illegal boats coming over? It's a real concern to people that we can't seem to control our borders. People say we voted for Brexit, but of course it's a different issue. We're not talking about people coming in legally from Europe as we had when we were in the EU, but they are puzzled why we have a tough Home Secretary, Priti Patel, and she is a tough Home Secretary, why we still haven't got a grip with this problem. We all want to look after people that are genuinely seeking asylum. Nobody wants to turn someone away who's really seeking help. But it does seem as if we can't get a grip on this, and people are very concerned about it, and I think it's time we really sorted it out.
I guess some people would say there aren't safe routes to get into the country for genuine refugees, and therefore this is the only passage. Well, it's a very dangerous passage that they can make.
I've been chairing the bill, as it, every law has a committee stage, and I've been chairing it, so I've taken a kind of neutral view on it just to get it through at its stage. But I think we're talking about tens of miles of coastline. We're talking about very determined people who make a great deal of money out of this, the people traffickers. That's what's really, it's preying on people's distress and desperation. And many of these people are very desperate, and they are representing their families back home who are also desperate. I mean, quite a few of the people at the moment appear to be Afghanis, and we're yet to get the system for allowing legitimate, entry into the UK for this other group of Afghanis who are in a pretty awful situation.
So will this new law, the one that you have an independent role on, is this going to nail it? Because you're right to say Priti Patel talks very tough on this, and she has since day one. But not much has happened, has it? I'm
afraid that seems to be the case. I think she's fighting internal battles in the Home Office. I think there's an establishment in the Home Office that have tried to prevent her from being as tough as she would like. That's my feeling. She hasn't said that to me, I have to say. It's just my feeling about the way things are going. I think she genuinely wants to deal with this, and there is new legislation coming in, but I think it's a practical thing, actually. People are coming over. It's very hard to police very, very long coastline. You don't quite know where they're coming in from. But I do think we could be doing better.
And in a very dangerous situation, because some of the boats and the dinghies, the rafts you see people coming on, I mean, you have to be just really careful, because you can drown people in those situations. And so I think some of the legislation that's going to come in sounds very tough, but the ability to physically do it is very precarious.
So shall we have our first bit of parliamentary consensus? I put it to both of you. No one actually wants to see people risking life and limb and entering the country in that way, desperate or otherwise. Is that, would we both agree that this is not a good state of affairs?
And very, very bad people are making a lot of money and preying on people, and often pressurising them to do things when they get to the UK we'd all rather they weren't doing.
A lot of them are victims, really.
That's it, they are.
They're being used.
Yeah.
But we have to balance this, because I know my constituents are frustrated in what they see is happening, and I do think that we need to get a grip on it somehow. And, if there can be a consensus, great, because I don't think any of our constituents like to see what's happening. But equally so, we don't want to see people risking their lives and potentially drowning, and we don't want to see these people traffickers succeed. We need to clamp down on them.
And Andrew, you've been very honest and said that's what you'd ask the Prime Minister today, because you don't think the government is getting enough of a grip on it. But Siobhan, I put it to you that I haven't seen polling on this, but I reckon that if you said which party do you trust most on illegal immigrations, they'd still plump for this one, even though they're not doing enough. I may be wrong. It's my hunch that people...
Yeah, I suppose that we are a bit more anxious about how we come across and what we say, and maybe also a bit more realistic, because I'm not entirely convinced that tens of miles of coastline is an easy thing to police, or vulnerable people on rickety boats are easy to stop. I mean, and there is always a multi-layer approach to this. It is about being tough and having a good system, but it's also about the point you made about having safe routes, so people believe that there is a legitimate way that they could be in a queue and they could come. And while people want to make money and people are desperate, and obviously there's negotiations with the French as well.
Well, that's
and a lot of cash going their way, but not much in return. Siobhan, you have a Prime Minister's question today, what would it be?
Oh, well, last week I had one and I asked about my local hospital, St Helier. It's been under threat for about 24 years now. We've fought it off. They want to remove the A&E, the maternity, the intensive care and 62% of beds and take them to a much more wealthy area. And for me, this is a part of the levelling up agenda, because I think levelling up is an issue in London as much as it is in the North East, the North West or the Midlands. And that I just think it's wrong to take a hospital away from the people who are most unwell, are more likely to have difficult births, are more likely to use the hospital, that we need to think about how are we impacting on our poorest and most, most needy constituents.
Now, of course, questions from MPs are often really, really good. The answers, sometimes,
rough,
sometimes you feel like you haven't really got the answer you want, regardless of who's answering or what party the Prime Minister is from. What answer did you get from the Prime Minister when you raised your local hospital?
Oh, a bit of a rubbish one, yeah. He did look a bit rough last week, actually. He looked like he was a bit tired and emotional. But no, the answer was rubbish. But, nevertheless, I got to ask my question, got to make the point that it's going to cost them £600 million to do this scheme, and only 400 million to rebuild a hospital where it's nearly needed.
Why are they doing it? How would they justify it? There must be some...
There's a whole trend, isn't there, in the NHS to make things bigger, and to concentrate services, so basically that's why they want to do it.
Economies of scale, is that how?
Yeah.
We've had similar things. We've got a hospital called Queen's Hospital in Romford, and that was built in actually the early years of Tony Blair's government. And there's been all kinds of issues with the design of the hospital, and also the time it takes for people to get their operations, waiting lists, all kinds of issues, and it goes up and down. But the reality is, lots of hospitals, smaller ones, have been condensed into the larger one. In some cases, I can see that because you're focusing services in one particular place, you're specialising in a particular location. But in other cases, I think that it takes away from the locality. So it's no longer local, it's too distant from
people. And you
people.
take it away from a poor area where the jobs are needed, where the shops are supported by the hospital. It's more than just that. The issue about concentration for stroke or those major things, no argument about that. But most of what the NHS does is not those kind of really hard-end, really specialist things. And I just think we risk the very people who we know need to go to hospital not doing it early enough. I mean, the stuff that we're beginning to understand about maternity, that Black and Asian women are 5 times more likely to die in childbirth. The fact that 25% of stillbirths are as a result of poverty. And in our country, in the 5th richest country in the world, and, we just got to look at how do people access those services.
But before we go to a break, I was just going to make the point that, in some ways, if you are a Labour MP and you put a question to the Prime Minister, it's easy, really. You're going to have a go at him. Obviously, you're in a different party from him. It's harder, isn't it, when it's your own benches? And you would have experienced this when you were under the last Labour government. How do you get that balance right between or maybe you don't? I mean, some on your side, go for the jugular.
Right. Well, a lot of MPs will ask sort of pre-prepared questions that
because the whips and
I didn't want to say the whips.
So party managers, just for our viewers.
You do.
For our
I
viewers.
tend not to take those. I tend to think of my own questions and ask what I think is appropriate for that particular time. And I like to focus on constituency issues as well. It's a good opportunity to do that. But when I do this, and to be fair, when Labour was in power, I tried to ask questions that were ones I wanted genuine answers to, rather than just make political points. Because I think too often the public see us at PMQ and other types of questions. It looks like we're just trying to, bite chunks out of each other. Okay, there's a time and a place for that. We are politicians, we understand that. But I think most of the time, and Siobhan will bear me out on this, probably 90% of our time is not spent on political point scoring. It's about really trying to do the best for our constituents and really solving problems and helping people and making lives better for local people.
That local thing isn't exclusively a local issue, because if it's happening in our constituencies, it's happening to other people, and it's a real issue nationwide.
Yeah, good point. Stay right there. We'll be carrying on our fantasy PMQs right after the weather.
Hello again. Something of a north-south split with the weather today. Brighter skies across the north with some sunshine, much of the south fairly drab with outbreaks of rain and drizzle for some as well. That's being caused by this rippling, wiggling weather fronts that's kind of grinding to a halt through the rest of today over the Midlands, parts of South Wales and East Anglia. So some outbreaks of rain likely here. The far southeast may see a little bit of brightness, but much of the southern half of the UK covered in cloud. Brighter skies for northern England, southern Scotland, Northern Ireland. In the far northwest, though, it is windy and there will be a few showers coming in here, particularly over the Highlands. Temperatures across the north, 10, 11 at best with a bit of sunshine. It is pretty mild further south. 15, 16 in the London area, but it doesn't feel all that mild if you're stuck under that weather front and the cloud, rain and drizzle, which will continue on and off through the evening to push into parts of East Anglia, maybe down towards the southeast before tending to fizzle out. Another band of showery rain across northern Scotland. Otherwise largely dry, and some fog is likely. It could be quite thick through the early hours over parts of northern England, North Wales, southern Scotland, where things will turn quite chilly. Again, it will stay pretty mild overnight across the south. So another mild day here. Again, predominantly cloudy across the south. There'll be the odd shower coming into North Wales later, maybe southwest Scotland, northwest England, but some brightness likely across eastern areas. A bit of sunshine, but generally fairly cloudy. The breeze starting to strengthen, and notice behind me there are further bands of rain. That's tied into an area of low pressure that's going to bring more persistent rain across the country during Thursday evening and into Friday, and it will increase the winds as well. So that area of low pressure really will dominate from Thursday night onwards, bringing, as I say, a spell of wet and windy weather for most, coming in and then kind of fizzling out. So it turns drier through Saturday, and at the moment Sunday looks dry for much of the UK. Bye for now.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. I'm still here with Conservative MP Andrew Rosendale and Labour MP Siobhan McDonagh, chewing over the big political issues of the day. So we know the Prime Minister has gone up to Glasgow today. One newspaper is reporting that he wasn't supposed to go up till the weekend, but he may have wanted to get away from all the stories about sleaze, so took an earlier day trip. It's been difficult for your party, hasn't it, in the last week?
Look, politics is always difficult. There are always issues that come out of nowhere that you don't expect. You have to deal with it, and you have to confront problems when they exist. And there's no doubt there are some issues here that need to be confronted. So Boris has to focus on doing his job. He is the Prime Minister. He's running the country. He's making difficult decisions. And he can't be constantly distracted by individual MPs who've made misjudgments. He's got to focus on the real job, day-to-day job in hand.
Andrew, doesn't that mean that it is then extraordinary that last week he chose to move an amendment to change how MPs are regulated because of an individual?
Well, I agree with you, Siobhan, and it was all done in a rush without thinking, and that's why it's been reversed. So I think that it's right that MP should have an appeal. If anyone's done something wrong, I mean, sometimes it's not deliberate. Sometimes you make misjudgments or you forget things. I don't want to be judgmental. You know, everyone can make a mistake, but there should be an appeal process.
I'm not quite sure how you can earn £100,000 for lobbying and not divulge to the ministers you're meeting that you're being paid. That's quite a stretch.
One of your own MPs actually said, under whatever rules, you know, with whatever system, with whatever appeal, there was no coming back from that particular case.
I'm not going to defend any particular MP or talk about an individual case.
Fine.
But as a matter of principle, in every walk of life, if you lose your job, if you're sacked, or if something goes wrong and you're in trouble, you do get a right of appeal. And I voted for it simply because there were questions to be answered, there were issues that were raised, and I do think a reform of the system is needed.
Except
an appeal is right, surely. You agree with that, surely?
Except the guys, your guys on the committee, a number of them have said, look, he's completely banged to rights. There is no appeal system in the world that would have got him off there.
And that's why muddling up the principle of appeal with the case was wrong.
Yeah, that was so... Yeah. OK. Well, you know, I've gone through the lobby on things. You've justified how you voted, which is absolutely fine. But I know Siobhan will have been in the same position, I'm sure. When you whips and you think, this whip's not right, and sometimes you do it, and apparently lots of your colleagues are furious. Some of them have said so on the record. It's tough in that environment, isn't it? Do you feel aggrieved having been whipped to vote for it and for that?
If I don't agree with something, I tell my whip I'm not going to vote for it. I do that. I mean, I do it sometimes. You know, I'm a loyal party member, and I don't like voting against my government, and I'm sure Siobhan, I don't know if you voted against Tony Blair's government ever, I'm not sure you did ever rebel, but I do rebel sometimes.
Yes, you do.
If I disagree, but as long as you tell the whips, you explain why you disagree, but you do it on a matter of principle for good reason. What I don't think is healthy for any MP just to be voting fodder. You know, we're not robots. We should be independently minded. And I think the public prefer MPs that are a bit more independently minded, will say what they think, and sometimes be prepared to vote against their own party if they think it's the right thing to do.
Should an MP have a second job? That's where the discussion and debate is moving to, Siobhan.
Generally, I think not. But I think that if you are, you know, a doctor, a nurse, a health professional, somebody who has to keep registration. In order to keep registration, you have to do so many hours a year. Given the life expectancy in this job, it's not mine and Andrew's. You know, we've had a really long period of time as MPs, and as you know, Gloria, that's not the same.
If I'd wanted to be.
Yeah, there's not the same for everybody. No. So I think we have to look at it. I think where it becomes blurred is where people get jobs because of the experience they've had in government, and they earn what seems to many people just really huge amounts of money for not really doing that much. That's hard to understand.
That's straight. Is that a fair point? Do you agree?
To some extent, I think that it would be very wrong to say that you only want full-time career politicians. I like the idea that MPs do have other businesses, that they have other skills that they use to benefit the country. Some have family businesses, for instance. You know, a lot have family businesses. So I don't think you should just prevent that from happening. But I do think the system needs to be clear and transparent. It's absolutely wrong that an MP should should be paid a lot of money to then lobby within Parliament. There are rules on that. And clearly some of the lines are a bit blurred, and this needs to be tightened up.
Yes, so basically banning consultancy, banning lobbying, banning being on.
I'm not entirely convinced they're blurred. You know, you're not allowed to lobby, full stop. Or paid lobbying. I mean, that's one of the extraordinary things. I'm sure you, Andrew, and I certainly have. You know, if local businesses need something from government, I'm delighted to try and talk and try and help, because that's our job.
Yeah.
But when the dividing line is you're being paid to do it and nobody knows that's what you're doing, that becomes the real issue.
Well, I agree, and I think my priority has always been my constituency. I've never taken a paid consultancy. I don't know
I'm
if
sure you
Siobhan has.
have, no.
I've never done it. So I've only ever had an MP's salary since I've been an MP for 20 years. And I don't think I'd be interested in that. But I mean, if we retired and we left Parliament, then clearly, you know, we'd all have to get a job somewhere. And it's inevitable that our experience and knowledge could be of use to a company, and lots of MPs do go on to do other things.
But
so you've got to get this right. You don't want to condemn people's lives.
No. But my issue about lobbying is actually I think companies pay for stuff they don't need to pay for.
Yeah.
A friend of mine who's passed away, who you'll know, David Cairns, used to go to lobbying companies and say, "What cupboard do you keep the old rope in?" You know, the idea that they were getting money for old rope because MPs who wanted to support jobs in their constituency would do it because it's their job.
Just very one-word answer. Some people, and I don't think the public will have any sympathy for this, some people say if MPs were paid more, then they wouldn't even need a second job. Do you deserve a pay rise?
I never entered politics because of the money. I didn't even know what an MP was paid when I became an MP. They had to tell me when I arrived. I've only ever been in politics because I believe in things. I believe in my country and I love my constituency. It's where I'm from. I was born and brought up in Romford. So I don't do it for the money, and I'll accept whatever pay we're given.
I can't disagree with a word of what Andrew's just said.
What a lovely way to end. Thank you so much. You've been a fantastic panel. Thank you so much for coming in. Now, Boris Johnson has left Westminster for Glasgow today to speak at COP26. Our political correspondent Tom Howard is there and joins us now. Tom, nice to see you. Was this always in the diary for the Prime Minister?
I think it's raised a couple of eyebrows. Certainly, people weren't expecting the Prime Minister to come back this early, potentially expecting him to come back for a victory lap when an agreement had been reached late on Friday. Coming back on the Wednesday raises some questions about how much progress has been made in these negotiations. To what extent is Number 10 worried that things are not quite on track, that they may not walk away with the seismic Glasgow declaration that they really want, the political win to rival Paris that they strive for? Is it potentially in the balance? Is this why Boris Johnson, coming up today by train rather than plane, potentially has learnt his lesson after those scolding headlines from his flight back down to London only a few days ago? Is this now because he really believes that these negotiations need some political capital, some catalyst capital to drive them forward? Quite potentially.
Tom, finally, when do we expect to hear from the Prime Minister?
Well, there'll be a press conference that's due to start at 4:30 this afternoon, although knowing these press conferences, it probably will be quite a few minutes late. In the last few press conferences that this Prime Minister has held, the media have been sat waiting for up to 15, 20 minutes after the official start time, although we're told 4:30.
Doubt talk to you ahead and beyond that too. Good to see you, Tom, and looking forward to having you back with us next week. Next, I'll be talking to a member of the Parliamentary Standards Committee about what's gone wrong and how faith in politicians can be restored. But first, here's the news with Rosie.
I'm Rosie Wright. Let's get you up to date. A survivor of child sexual exploitation is calling for the resignations of the Rotherham Council leader and the South Yorkshire Police and Crime Commissioner. It comes after GB News revealed up to 1,600 children may have been at risk of grooming in the borough since 2017. Sir Geoffrey Cox says he doesn't believe he's broken parliamentary rules after he was accused of using his MP office to carry out private work for the British Virgin Islands inquiry. Labour's calling for a standards investigation, with the Deputy Leader Angela Rayner saying his actions appear to be a brazen breach of the rules. Negotiators from nearly 200 countries are scrutinising a first draft of the COP26 agreement, hoping to strike a deal before the summit ends on Friday. The paper, published this morning, urges nations to revisit and strengthen their emission targets for 2030 so that global warming is limited to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Wales has announced COVID passes are going to be required to enter cinemas, theatres and concert halls from Monday. Protesters have been demonstrating against the extended measures. Currently, proof of full vaccination or a negative test is only needed for nightclubs and large events. Sir Elton John has been honoured by the Prince of Wales for his career in music and campaigning work on AIDS. The musician received an Order of the Companions of Honour, recognising 5 decades in the spotlight, as well as his action on HIV. Sir David Attenborough and Dame Judi Dench have also received the award. You are right up to date. I'll be back with more on today's stories in half an hour.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Now, Boris Johnson may be in Glasgow, but the sleaze row isn't going anywhere. More and more MPs are coming under scrutiny for paid work they do outside of their parliamentary role. Now I'm delighted to be joined by Alberto Costa, a member of the Committee on Standards and also Conservative MP for South Leicestershire. Good to see you, Alberto. Thank you for your time. Now, we know you're a member of the Standards Committee, and as such, you can't comment on any future potential cases, and of course, we will respect that. But we do want to talk to you in general terms about how we can clean up politics. Now, in the debate last week, Peter Bottomley, your colleague, who is one of the, well, he is the longest-serving Conservative MP. He is father of the House, so the longest-serving MP, male MP, full stop. He said that the system actually works well. Now, does he have a point in that if the government hadn't tried to unsuspend your decision, then the rules perhaps do work OK at the moment? What do you think?
Well, good afternoon, Gloria, and it's always a pleasure to be on your excellent programme. Look, I do agree with Peter. I think the system does work, but that doesn't mean that there isn't room for improvement. And I've been passionately arguing as a member of the Committee on Standards that we should be enhancing the system. And in fact, my speech was all about improving the system that we have. It wasn't about saying that the system doesn't work or that individuals involved in the system aren't suitable in any way at all. It was about improving the system that we have. And the 2 points that I made is that we need clarity in the rules that form the Committee on Standards and the Commissioner on Parliamentary Standards. And let me give you an example. The Commissioner, who does a really tough job, she's put in this unenviable position where she is the investigator of complaints against MPs, where she decides on whether an MP has broken the Code of Conduct, and she presents her findings to the Committee on Standards. And that's all fine and well. But then she has this other role. After she's made her presentations and after an MP might have made his or her representations, she's back in the room during deliberations to be an advisor to the committee. And at the very least, there's a perception there that there's a confusion with the roles. And I'm very confident that going forward, the long-standing pleas that I've made that we need clarity on this role, I think will be listened to. And I think in due course, the House of Commons will come to separate these roles and give greater clarity. So that's one of the issues where I think we can enhance and improve the system. The other issue is having a better tiered appeal structure. At the moment, we don't really have any proper rules of appeal as such. What I would like to see the Committee on Standards evolve into is a committee with a proper appellate structure that very closely mirrors the structure that we've got for bullying and sexual harassment claims against MPs. Those are adjudicated by a former High Court judge, Sir Stephen Irwin, and I very much believe that the Committee on Standards should improve its systems by having a similar appellate structure to that, with potentially the involvement of former High Court judges like Sir Stephen Irwin, at least in one of the maybe higher tier levels of that appellate structure. But I'm very pleased that I think things will be moving in the direction that I've long argued, well before the present case, that we need to go to improve and enhance the system, not least for members of the public, so they've got full confidence in our standard system.
Let's explore that. Can you explain to us, how does a complaint get made against an MP? Is there strict criteria? Who can make a complaint? How does it work?
Anyone can make a complaint against a Member of Parliament, and rightly so. If anybody feels that the Member of Parliament has breached the code, then they can make a complaint, and the person that should receive that complaint is rightly and properly the independent Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards. She's independent of MPs, but she is an officer of the House of Commons. And she has an excellent team that do the work, the very challenging and stressful and complex task of investigating complaints, at least the ones that the Committee on Standards tends to deal with. And it's then her job, once she's concluded her investigation, to decide whether or not an MP has breached the Code of Conduct. If it's a less serious breach of the Code of Conduct, she can use what's called a rectification process, where she can get the MP to offer the MP to apologise, and the matter can be brought to a conclusion. If it's more serious than that, she would refer the matter to me and my colleagues on the Committee on Standards, and we would then give the MP in question an opportunity to be heard, present the case after the Commissioner, and then the Commissioner would come back into the committee to help us with our deliberations, to be present to answer any questions that committee members might have. And that's where I think that change needs to be made. It's that latter point, not the principal role of the Commissioner. I think the principal role of her being the investigator and decision maker and presenter of the case should remain. She does an excellent job in that, and I've absolutely no question about that particular part of the system. It's the part that I'm involved in which I think needs to be improved.
Do the rules on MPs' second jobs need to be tightened up?
Well, I would always say that the Committee on Standards, one of its principal functions is rightly to constantly review the Code of Conduct and the associated rules to make sure that they meet the needs of the 21st century and that they are empathetic to the changes in culture that we see across society. I think we need to be very careful. It's very easy to say, look, MPs, their primary role is to be an MP, they shouldn't have a second job. And when people say that to me, I often say, well, what would you do with the MP that's a doctor? Would you preclude the doctor from working in A&E? And we do have a number of MPs that are doctors. What about firefighters or nurses? So I think we need to be a little bit careful before we just get carried away and say, oh, blanket ban on all second jobs. But certainly let's have that discussion. It's important we discuss it. We should also bear in mind MPs aren't the only taxpayer-funded individuals that often have second jobs. Doctors themselves that work in the NHS, consultants, often work in the private sector and can make a very large sum of money indeed in the private sector, augmenting their taxpayer-funded NHS salary. So before we get perhaps too carried away with just looking at MPs, I think it's certainly fair to look at the whole of society for taxpayer-funded roles that might allow individuals to do second jobs.
I don't think people are worried about an MP working in A&E or being a psychiatrist. There are those examples on both sides of the House. They are concerned about a conflict of interest, that MPs are on a retainer by a company or a consultancy and are paid for that. And rightly they will think, well, why else would a firm or consultancy pay an MP if it is not to influence events?
I think I need to be very careful because I don't want to make any comment at all that touches upon any current media interest. So I've got to exercise extreme caution in what I say. But what I would say is some MPs do really good second jobs. For example, a lot of MPs write books. Some excellent MPs have written some fantastic books. And one's got to be careful that we don't say, it's not, you can be a doctor or a firefighter or a nurse, but you can't then, write a book. What about MPs that also present documentaries or appear in the media and are paid? Now, I'm not being paid to do this interview, of course, but there are some MPs that do media work, as you know, Gloria. I mean, you come from a background, you were an MP and you are and were an expert in media. So we need to be very careful. We don't just get carried away saying blanket ban on MPs doing second jobs. It's certainly let's have that discussion and debate. And where that discussion and debate leads to, I'm open to looking at the code of conduct, looking at the rules again. And I'm sure that we will do that. Any appropriate committee and standards, whether it's a parliamentary one or whether it's one for solicitors or doctors, should always look at the codes of conduct that they have and make sure that they're in keeping with modern day thought.
Some people would question, and this is more an exploratory question for you so you can explain it, because some people would think, why is there a committee that exists to look into the behaviour of MPs, which consists of other MPs? How do you get on the Standards Committee as an MP?
That's, again, a very good question. I mean, I've long argued that MPs should be taken out of the adjudication of other MPs. However, there are counter-arguments that people who are not MPs have come to me saying that wouldn't be a good idea. So if in the adjudication process, if you didn't have MPs, if you say just had High Court judges, which is a view that I've long shared, but if you did just have High Court judges, they might not have the knowledge of the customs and practices of the House of Commons. And in fact, they might very well argue that you need to have some MPs on any panel that adjudicates in order to assist the judges. So there are counter-arguments, and I'm cognizant of those as well. And that's why when you look at the professions, whether it's the medical profession, whether it's the legal profession, the accountancy profession, you often have members of that profession involved at some point in the regulation and adjudication of potential complaints against members. And each regulatory body has its own system. But I think for us, we are very fortunate indeed in the House of Commons. We've got 7 excellent, hard-working lay people who contribute a wide range of skill sets and experiences to help in the process. But enhancing that process is something that we should not shy away from.
Do This question, I don't think it has any conflict or any bearing on the role that you perform in the Standards Committee. Some politicians, and it is a minority, and some journalists actually, also a minority, say, you know what, if you paid members of Parliament more, they wouldn't feel the need to have second jobs. Do you have any truck with that?
No. I'm comfortable with the fact that an independent body, truly independent of Parliament, it's called the Independent Parliamentary Standards Authority. It was set up, Gloria, you'll remember, lots of your viewers will remember, was set up following that dreadful MP expenses scandal before my time, some 12 years ago. And that body was set up by statute, by legislation, and it alone makes decisions on my salary and the salary of MPs. I have never had any involvement in adjudicating, and rightly so, on my salary. It is a matter for an independent body, and I'm not going to pass any other comment other than it's for them and them alone to make these decisions, wholly independent of MPs.
And the spotlight is also on the other place, the House of Lords, and whether peerages are awarded to some people who make generous payments to political parties. It's happened in both when there was a Labour government and also under this government. Does the House of Lords and its practices, could that do with a fresh look?
I think it's fair to say that, I think the House of Lords and House of Lords reform has been discussed since Gladstone and Disraeli's time. There's nothing new looking at the House of Lords and saying, can it be improved? Should we have more electoral mandates involved, etc.? So there's nothing new in that argument. It's a very, very long argument that we've had in this country for more than 100 years. I can certainly add my opinion. I think that we do need a second chamber in this country. I think that many of the Lords bring with them a very wide range of skill sets and experience. The vast majority have had nothing to do with political donations or trade unions, but they come in, they're teachers, nurses, doctors, scientists. They bring a very wide range of skill sets with them. What's important is that the House of Commons is the de facto supreme governing body of the United Kingdom. And at the end of the day, we have conventions in place to ensure that the democratically elected chamber is the one that has the ultimate say, and long may that continue.
Roberto Costa, it is always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much, as ever, for your time. Thank you. Now, following a vote in the Senedd last night, it will become mandatory for people in Wales to show a COVID pass on entry into cinemas, theatres and concert halls from next week. Members of the Welsh Parliament voted in favour of the law, 39 for, 15 against, but hundreds of people gathered outside the building to protest the decision. Our Wales reporter, Lily Hewitson, was there.
So members of the Senedd have voted and it's passed, 39 votes to 15. Quite the difference to the last vote that we saw in the chamber on the COVID passes just a few weeks ago. Protesters gathered here on the steps of the Senedd earlier on this evening. They have now progressed down to the entrance of T. Howell. Here's what happened this evening.
No vaccine passports! No vaccine passports! No vaccine passports!
Awaiting the decision, hundreds of people gathered outside the Senedd on Tuesday evening, waiting to hear if it will become law to show the NHS COVID pass in theatres, cinemas and concert halls in Wales from Monday. It was pretty certain that the vote would pass. It was understood that Plaid Cymru would back Labour ministers on the decision, and that's exactly what happened. The two parties are currently negotiating a cooperation deal, but not forming a formal coalition. The Tories and the Lib Dems voted against the law, but it was a strong majority, 39 votes to 15. So now from Monday, if you live in Wales or you're just visiting, if you're going to the cinema, a theatre or a concert hall, you'll now have to show the NHS COVID pass on entry.
Because I feel that the COVID ID health passport scheme does not support any kind of benefit into stopping COVID or spreading COVID. It's literally controlling people's movements. If the whole idea of the COVID ID passport or the health passport is to limit the numbers and help protect people, what he's basically saying there alone is counterproductive to everything that we've been told. And I have not seen any scientific evidence that the health passport alone, even on that, limits the spread of COVID-19. The reason also I'm here is because I feel that once we get the expansion on, say, cinemas and theatres and wherever else they're going, it's going to be pubs, clubs, restaurants, and then shops, supermarkets. You know, either get a jab or get a vaccine, or you can't go into these places. These vital services, you know, like supermarkets and food centres and things like that. And if it's not based on any scientific evidence that this is all done to protect you, I mean, what are you doing it for? It's forcing obligation, it's coercion, and that goes against so many laws that we have in this country.
I've come to Cardiff today to make my voices heard, to actually have solidarity with people in Wales, to say it's absolutely unacceptable that there should be any vaccine passports. The last vote at the Senate should not have gone through. It was a draw, 28-28. It went through on a technical hitch. Now we're faced with them being extended to different venues across Wales. It's absolutely unnecessary. They're illogical. There's no health benefit. They're unscientific. But the main thing is we should never have to show our most intimate health details when we're going out. We never agreed to do a deal to participate in exchanging our freedoms to re-enter society. They're not contingent. There's absolutely no reason for them. So I'm here today to join in solidarity with people in Cardiff and across Wales and the whole of the United Kingdom. All eyes are on what's happening in the Senate right now. We know that the world is having a look at us. We're at a moment here where what was once 3 weeks to flatten the curve, 15 million jabs to freedom, has now become a situation where we're talking about needing digital health IDs to participate in normal society.
Following the vote, Welsh Government Minister for Health and Social Services Eluned Morgan said on the extension of the COVID passes, the decision to introduce them has not been taken lightly, and the venues that will be covered are indoors and see large numbers of people being closely together for prolonged periods of time. We will continue to work with the sectors who are implementing the scheme to best support them.
I was due to speak to a member of the Senedd who voted against this evening, but they have not been able to leave the building to speak to me as security have stopped them from exiting the building. But what is clear after this vote, although 39-15, it does seem that people are as frustrated inside the building as outside the Senedd this evening. Lily Hewitson, GB News.
You've been watching The Briefing with me, Gloria De Piero. The show is back every weekday from noon. Up next, it's On the Money with Liam Halligan. Then Liam and I will be with you together between 2 and 3. But for now, I'll leave you with your weather forecast.
Hello again. Something of a north-south split with the weather today. Brighter skies across the north with some sunshine, much of the south fairly drab with outbreaks of rain and drizzle for some as well. That's being caused by this rippling, wiggling weather fronts that's kind of grinding to a halt through the rest of today over the Midlands, parts of South Wales and East Anglia. So some outbreaks of rain likely here. The far southeast may see a little bit of brightness, but much of the southern half of the UK covered in cloud. Brighter skies for northern England, southern Scotland, Northern Ireland. In the far northwest, though, it is windy and there will be a few showers coming in here, particularly over the Highlands. Temperatures across the north, 10-11 at best with a bit of sunshine. It is pretty mild further south. 15, 16 in the London area, but it doesn't feel all that mild if you're stuck under that weather front and the cloud, rain and drizzle, which will continue on and off through the evening to push into parts of East Anglia, maybe down towards the southeast before tending to fizzle out. Another band of showery rain across northern Scotland. Otherwise largely dry and some fog is likely. It could be quite thick through the early hours over parts of northern England, North Wales, southern Scotland, where things will turn quite chilly. Again, it will stay pretty mild overnight across the south. So another mild day here. Again, predominantly cloudy across the south. There'll be the odd shower coming into North Wales later, maybe southwest Scotland, northwest England, but some brightness likely across eastern areas. A bit of sunshine, but generally fairly cloudy. The breeze starting to strengthen, and notice behind me there are further bands of rain. That's tied into an area of low pressure that's going to bring more persistent rain across the country during Thursday evening and into Friday, and it will increase the winds as well. So that area of low pressure really will dominate from Thursday night onwards, bringing, as I say, a spell of wet and windy weather for most, coming in and then kind of fizzling out. So it turns drier through Saturday, and at the moment Sunday looks dry for much of the UK. Bye for now.
Join me, Alex Phillips, for the afternoon agenda on GB News, Monday to Thursday from 4 p.m. till 6 p.m. We don't lecture to you or try to tell you what to think. We do a deep delve into a topic with views from across the range of debate, therefore leaving you, the viewer, to make up your own mind. Join me, Alex Phillips, for the afternoon agenda on GB News, 4 till 6, Monday to Thursday.